As an organization based in Tacoma, Washington, we acknowledge the Puyallup tribe and invite you to visit the official website of the Puyallup tribe and listen to their land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe. The Puyallup people have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. We recognize that this land acknowledgement is one small step toward that true allyship, and we commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories of the indigenous peoples of the land and beyond.
Thank you so much. And you might have noticed that we have a new Zoom facilitator today, and I would like to thank Belinda, our Puget Sound book artist president, for stepping in on this event today. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jane Carlin, and it is a delight to introduce today's speaker. Many of you know and recognize Laurie as our outstanding Zoom moderator. But today we have the pleasure to learn more about her artistic and creative work. I first met Laurie through the San Diego Book Arts community when they approached the Collins Library with the offer of a generous gift of a portfolio of original art pages from a collaborative project of over 40 artists in honor of the organization's 20th anniversary. Artists responded to a series of haiku poems entitled Over the Moon. Collins Library at the University of Puget Sound was delighted to showcase these beautiful pages in 2021. And for those of you that are local, anytime that you want to see these, you can make arrangements through the archives and special collections. This collaborative project is just one of many, and I think we'll learn a lot about those today, that Laurie is involved in. In fact, her efforts to engage artists across the country in collaboration is impressive. She describes herself as a sketcher, a book artist, and wanderer, and I will add to that a role model for engagement in the book arts. She has organized a number of collaborative projects, participated in creating exchanges of books, zines, and postcards, always engaging in learning about new technologies and connecting organizations together. Laurie exudes a positive spirit and a can-do attitude. She shares that she came to art later in life after a successful career in business and nonprofit management. Now she has time to delve into her creative side, and it is quite a creative side. She has studied book arts, watercolor sketching, paper weaving, embroidery, and more. Her preferred mediums are book arts, paper cutting, rubber stamp carving, and watercolor, but she is always open to learning more. Laurel is an example of lifelong learning and the ability to harness your creative experience. It's a great pleasure to have you here, Laurie, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Jane. It's such a pleasure to be here and to hear your extremely kind words and to see so many. My daughter just embarrassed me in the chat. And to see so many friends, family, and fellow collaborators in the audience. Thank you so much. This is my collaborative art journey from 2005 to the present. What did I do before my art journey began? Well, I was born and raised in San Mateo, California. I have a BA in social welfare from UC Berkeley, 1976. I was co-owner of Laurel Allen Imports, a wholesale importer of Guatemalan handicrafts from 1979 to 91. I was a small business consultant specializing in accounting and inventory systems from 91 to 2000. And then I was a disability advocate and activist, nonprofit founder, board member, and executive director from 98 to 2012. I divorced my first husband in 91. I was happily remarried to my good husband, as I call him, in 94. And unfortunately, he passed in 2024. I am, and coincidentally, today is our 31st anniversary. I am the mother of 2 adult daughters who I am inordinately proud of. Oil pastels at the San Diego Zoo with Joe Nairi. In the summer of 2005, my 9-year-old daughter, Marissa, insisted that I attend the zoo art camp with her. Joe Nairi is famous in our local art community for teaching children and adults for nearly 60 years. Even so, I reluctantly registered because I couldn't imagine spending 5 days in a row drawing at the zoo. To give myself an escape clause, I scheduled a few appointments during the week. After the first day, I was hooked and did my best to cancel all of my appointments. For the next few years, I made a point of joining her at least once a week each summer. This gave me a confidence in my art that I hadn't had since childhood. Next, I started taking art classes at the La Jolla Athenaeum. In 2008, I was taking a break from my nonprofit work and following my strong desire to put color on paper, as I like to say, I began taking classes at the LA Athenaeum. One of my first workshops was with local book artist Sybil Rubatten in a class called Mapping the Imagination. It was in this class that I made my first artist book, aptly titled The Journey Begins. And that's this in the lower left corner. We used the map fold structure, and when I explained that I wanted to use the 16 panels to tell 16 different travel stories and began describing one of them to her, she wisely said, "No, that is a book in itself. You have to make a series." True to form, I balked, but then I locked myself in by adding the inscription, first in a series chronicling the significant road trips of my life. There are now 13 books in that series. This opened up a whole new world to me, and I was hooked, taking more and more classes at the Athenaeum and at our local community college. Sketching in watercolor and rubber stamps. After a few years of every type of painting and drawing class, I finally took sketching with ink and watercolor with Jane LaFazio, and that changed my attitude towards illustration. Occasionally, I'll do a super detailed drawing now, but my preferred style is sketching with ink and watercolor. Along with sketching, Jane also taught me to carve rubber stamps in that same series of classes. I remember her telling us that she often realized she needed a new stamp for a project and would just go carve it. I thought I'd never feel that easy. It would never feel that easy to me, but just the other day, I did just that, as I often do. I find myself incorporating rubber stamps into my projects, and especially in the postcard exchanges I'm a part of. Occasionally, I even teach this fun practice. Travel journals. My primary subject matter for my artist books is memoir, often about my own travels. Stories can cover a few hours, a day, or weeks of travel. I love this medium as a way to tell my stories. And when I started making zines, I realized that many of my artist books could be reproduced in zine format, and I'll talk more about that later. On the screen, you see here in the lower right corner, there's a whole collection of the same book. And in the center is my original book done in meander form on watercolor. And what this was in the fall of 2020, when we were finally able to get back to Kauai, where we have a house, I went to the Waipawa Farmers Market, which I love, and spent hours just walking through the market and stopping and sketching something representative of each of the different booths in the market. And then I went home and added more detail to the book. And then back in San Diego, I made tiny copies of this book and printed them out on watercolor paper. And the next time we went to Kauai, I went around the market and gave them out to the vendors that I had sketched in the original one. And it was such a wonderful experience. They were so thrilled to be represented and to get their own little their own little remembrance. And that's something that I do often when I make a book where I've been traveling with other people. I will often make copies of it to give to them. Okay. Paper cutting. My first paper cutting experience was in a community workshop with local artist Bhavna Mehta. This was back in 2015. I quickly became fascinated with her techniques, especially in cutting text. This became a calming experience for me in the early days of COVID when I discovered a poem that resonated strongly with me. I got permission from the poet Vera Tucker to put it into book form by hand cutting the text as written out in my own cursive. And that book, Long Distance Love, is now in the Cynthia Sears Book Arts collection at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art. And you can see here, this is one of the pages, one of the sections of the poem that I've cut on dark blue paper, and this is before I've affixed it to this sky blue painted paper that I've created the book with. Okay. There are a number of other paper art forms that I enjoy, particularly paper weaving, stitching on paper, paper making, and Moroccan geometric drawing, but I can talk about those in a different presentation. As we begin the discussion of my collaborative projects, I want to mention that I'm only occasionally going to specifically name other participants and volunteers. If I were to name every person who played a significant role, this presentation would take hours. All the way through every project, I've received untold amounts of help and support, and I'm so grateful. Particularly with the projects that included multiple organizations, every time I asked, can someone do this, whatever it was, at least one or two volunteers showed up, which has only made each project even better than the one before. Over the Moon in 2015. I was still a novice book artist and had just become membership chair for San Diego Book Arts in 2015 when I was asked to join their new collaborative project in an administrative role. This was my first time doing art collaboratives, and I had absolutely no idea what I was agreeing to, but it was a wonderful experience. In the nearly 2 years that it took to run art and book structure workshops, coordinate photographing and printing the pages, produce a catalog, and organize 2 separate art exhibits of the project, I learned more than I could have ever imagined. And most importantly, I became friends with dozens of local book artists who have remained important in my life to this day. The project was this. Diane Gage, a local poet and book artist, allowed us to use a large selection of haiku that she had written about the moon. Artists were each given a 15 by 20 inch sheet of 90-pound watercolor paper and asked to illustrate one or more of the haiku on that sheet of paper. The pages were professionally photographed and then commercially printed on ledger-sized sheets of quality paper with two of the artist pages per side of the sheet. Details about the project, title pages, colophon, etc. were also printed in the same format. Each artist received a full set of pages, and we were encouraged to create an artist book in any format we chose. My own artist book included sheets of vellum overlaid on the printed pages. And this is my book here. This is the outside of my book in the lower right corner. And then this is the inside with one of the artist pages here, and you can see the vellum page has been folded back, and so you can see that there's something on it, but I'll show you what that is. The vellum sheets had a photo of the artist holding their art and their handwritten artist statement. It was in getting those photos that my husband and I met Helen Petrie, and that's Helen there. She's a pistol. She was like 95 years old, who had met Helen Petrie, who promptly ordered my husband to get her own studio. He listened, and I moved into my own backyard studio roughly 6 months later. Years later, I was in a Zoom meeting that included Jane Carlin. The subject of collaborative projects came up, and as we discussed it, I realized that the Collins Library would be the perfect home for this very large project, and put San Diego Book Arts and the Collins Library in touch to work it out. In July of 2021, I was able to personally deliver the project to the library and meet Jane and numerous other members of Puget's PSBA who had collaborated in the project I'm going to talk about. Anyway, I met everyone in person, and here's a photo of me and Jane, and I'm holding up the book. This is how large it is. It's all housed in a clamshell binding. This is my page, the blue toned one, on it, and then this is another artist, Doria Gucher's page. Her medium, she did actually a quilt on the paper, and so it was like a patchwork quilt creating that scene, whereas I did colored pencil. Although I thoroughly enjoyed this project and learned so much and met so many wonderful people, when the next SDBA collaborative project, Postmark San Diego, was announced in 2017, I chose to simply be a participant, although I did lead a stamp carving workshop as a content resource for the postcards. Shelter in Place 2020. In April of 2020, in the very earliest days of COVID and lockdown, as SDBA membership chair, I was arranging to move our monthly meetings to Zoom. Days before our meeting, I was invited to attend Bay Area Book Arts' first Zoom meeting. I was enthralled to hear them discuss a project they were starting that involved making and sharing little books through the mail. I thought this was a brilliant idea. We were all trying to find our ways to stay busy and connect with others. So I presented a version of it at our first meeting to gauge interest. Everyone was enthusiastic, so I began working on the details. Because we were still in what I think of as the naive stage of COVID and assumed that it would pass shortly, I felt that it was important to get it going as soon as possible. The rules were simple: make 3 little books and send them to 3 people. Then 3 different people will each send you a book. Now you've connected with 6 people, and perhaps new friendships will blossom. It was the lack of community that we were all missing, and this was a way that I thought we could encourage it. I announced the project on May 1st, setting May 8th as the final date to register. On May 9th, with 40 registrants, I created the groups and sent out the mailing lists. In my rush to get it started, I forgot to shut down the registration site, and over the next few days, I got more signups. As I worked to accommodate them, more people expressed interest, so I reopened signups twice more and extended the mailing date. Ultimately, we had a total of 59 members participating, with most in San Diego, but also nearly a dozen from all over the country, including 4 entirely new members and 4 lapsed members. 214 little books traveled through the mail to bring us joy as we were encouraged to stay home and shelter in place. In this slide, you can see my books in the lower left corner. It's a double accordion that's sewn together at the valleys with my rubber stamps and painted watercolor paper. And then the collection of small books I received from the other members in my group. I was in 2 groups of 3. This project was so successful that before it even ended, we were discussing our next collaborative project, one that would include book artists from SDBA, and for the first time in the organization's history, a collaboration with 2 other organizations. Traveling book project. While we were working on the Shelter-in-Place Exchange, Gina Pacello told me about a collaborative project that she had been doing with a book arts group in Tacoma, Washington. You may have heard of them. I thought that sounded like fun, but of course I had to put my own twist on it. We invited Bay Area book artists and Paperworks Tucson to partner with us because we were already connected through a few common members who had joined us in the first project. These members had told their local friends and interest was growing. I formed a committee of members from the 3 organizations to work out the ground rules and look for volunteers because this was going to be a bigger and more complex project than the first. The basic rules were that we would be split into groups of 6, and each group would include members from each of the 3 organizations. Each member would create their own book structure and theme, fill the first page, and then send the book with blank pages to the next person on their list and include any instructions they wanted to share. The book would be filled as it passed from person to person, finally arriving back at the originator's home. The book had to fit inside a 6 by 9 inch manila envelope, but it could be any structure or materials that the originator wanted. Members were encouraged to keep in touch and work together, again, with the purpose of creating community. Once the books were completed, we had volunteers provide instructions and workshops on photographing our books so that another volunteer could create a virtual catalog, with yet another volunteer creating a print catalog. Many hands do make light work. The link to the virtual catalog, which is housed in the Bay Area Book Arts website, is included in the chat. We had book presentations on Zoom so that members could show their books and talk about the wonders and challenges they encountered. And because this mail exchange was going on in the fall of 2020, as the Postmaster General was actively trying to suppress the mail vote, we did have a lot of challenges with the mail. But overall, they got solved and everyone was able to complete their book. With such a large group, we had to hold at least 4 Zoom meetings to accommodate all who wanted to share. In the slide, you can see my book here in the upper center with the theme of water. And then this is in the upper right is the page of the catalog devoted to my group. And then I was so excited about the project that before I sent each new book along, I'd make a copy of everything that had come to me, and then I assembled the book the way the originator had, if that was clear. Some, like mine, were separate pages that the artist assembled once they were all returned. So these are the books, and I had different numbers of pages because I was at different points in the individual queues. So it was really fun. I think this one, Linda Kearns, might have been the final. I might have been the final artist to complete that because I think it's complete. Anyway, this project was just as successful as the first and led directly to a third project with even more organizations involved. Our success was being noticed and groups wanted to join in. As the traveling book project was ending, we heard that 4 other organizations would like to join us: PSBA, Norbag, Santa Fe Book Arts Group, and New England Book Artists. We chose a theme and structure that was reminiscent of the previous SDBA collaborative Postmark San Diego, but felt that given the national aspect of our group, it would be very different. This was the most complicated project of all. The premise was simple enough. Members would send handmade postcards celebrating where they lived to other members in their group, and then make a book out of the postcards they received. With 7 organizations, our total grew to 173 members, broken into 12 groups of 16 members. A few members were willing to join more than one group, and that has happened throughout all of these collaborative projects where we had groups. There were often people who said, "Oh, I'll be in 2 or even 3 different groups." And that meant we had a total of 191 batches of postcards going out for a total of 3,056 postcards flying across the country. To give members techniques to use to make their postcards, 7 different Zoom workshops were offered: gelatin plate printing, 2-plate linocut, oil monoprints, reduction printing, calligraphy, rubber stamp carving, and how to digitize your art. After the postcards were completed, 6 workshops on book structures specifically geared for postcards were offered, including Lark's Head binding, which was what I used in my book, Blizzardish book, tape bound binding, carousel binding, cap slot binding, and flag books. One member maintained the YouTube channel for the workshop recordings. Additionally, a workshop on photography techniques was offered, a virtual gallery was created, and a print catalog. The logo was designed by Christina Hajosi, that's this here, and carved by me, and there's my rubber stamp. The link to the website, which is housed on the New England Book Artists website, is included in the chat. In the slide, and Belinda, if you could be dropping those in the chat, that would be great. In the slide, you can see my own book. This is my book. And then this is my postcard with the message that I included to each one, which is, if you come to San Diego, I'll take you on a tour of the outdoor sculpture collection at UCSD. And then this top postcard here is Jessie Wings, who is here today. And this bottom one is Dorothy McQuistion's, and I believe Dorothy's also here. My own book was in the PSBA members exhibit, annual exhibit called Collaboration in 2023, and it won the Excellence in Collaboration Award. Thank you. Fortuitously, due to the success of the vaccine, as the project reached completion, the world was beginning to reopen, and we were once again free to travel and visit with friends old and new. This project was joyous and successful beyond anything I could have dreamed of. I'm so grateful to all the participants and organizers who've made this possible. After the project ended in the fall of 2021, I felt a need to separate myself from the organization I had been a part of through all of this, and I thought my time leading collaborative projects was over, but I was wrong. Box of surprises, make a book. In the summer of 2022, I received an email from Jane Sprague asking if there were going to be more collaborative projects, something that many members had asked me over the preceding months. I was about to give her my standard response that she should speak to the organization, but something made me stop and rethink that. I realized that I had all of the skills and tools to lead a collaborative project. I was in close contact with book artists from all over the country, thanks to Zoom and the collaborative projects, so why not do it without an organization? I asked Jane to partner with me because she's an excellent writing instructor and had led free writing workshops for our monthly meetings. She agreed, and we set out to plan our first project. The concept behind this project came from a workshop run by Yuka Petz for the Minnesota Center for Book Arts, entitled Mystery Book, Make an Artist Book. And I'm going to stop for a second and mention that if you notice a pattern, I take other people's ideas and tweak them a little bit to become our collaborative projects. I want to honor everyone who has given me ideas and where I've stolen their idea and changed it slightly, but thank you. In this class, Everyone received a box of materials prepared by Yuka and then had 60 minutes to create a book using all of the supplies in the book, and extra credit if you use the box itself. Of course, we added a collaborative twist. Instead of one person preparing all of the boxes, each member sent a box of supplies from their own stash, nothing should be purchased, to another member. The sender received a box from a different member, and the receiver sent a box to another member, giving each person a direct connection with at least two members of the group, the person they sent to and the person they received from. After receiving the box, the artist kept it sealed until their scheduled Zoom meeting. When they opened it at the designated time, they had 90 minutes to complete a book or multiple books using all the items in the box and nothing from their own studio except tools and adhesives. There were multiple Zoom meetings for this, but I made sure to schedule the sender and the receiver in the same meeting so they could see what each other was doing. In total, 40 book artists across the country sent boxes to one another. In the photos, Renee Ricketts sent this batch of materials to Carol Harter, who turned them into this lovely book, accordion book, that included a jute closure with gems and stones on it. And then this is a picture of one of our lively Zoom meetings, everybody showing what they'd completed in the time. For this project, I completed a Google Sites website, my first attempt at website creation, and the link is in the chat. Memoir-based zine exchange. This was the project I really wanted to do when I started doing these independent collaboratives, but I knew that it was going to take a lot longer to get going. So I did the box of surprises first. But from Wikipedia, a zine, short for magazine or fanzine, is a small circulation, self-published work of original or appropriated text and images, usually reproduced via a copy machine. For our purposes, we also add the definition that it is a single sheet of paper folded and cut to make this little book. Some zines include multiple sheets of paper. In early 2023, I invited book artists from across the country to make a zine with a story based on some experience in their life and share it directly with the other members. The only requirement was that the story was presented in zine format and, to quote the Moth Storytelling podcast, the stories are true as remembered by the storyteller. 43 artists from across the country submitted a total of 47 zines. Members sent me their printed zines and I packaged them and mailed them to the other members. And this in the upper right corner is my dining table laid out with all these packages getting ready to be inserted and mailed off. To aid in creation, we had Zoom workshops to learn about different zine structures, because from that single piece of paper and the same set of folds, you can produce a lot of different structures, writing and editing, and how to format a zine on the computer, and also how to use Photoshop for your zine. And along with that, we had final Zoom meetings to discuss the zines and stories and share their backstories. I also created a Google Sites website for this project, and the link is in the chat. So this is this is my collection of the zines produced for this project. And I created a little woven basket because I was often printing out the zines multiple times, so I had extra copies of them. So I cut those copies up into strips and created this woven basket to house my collection. And this is my personal zine, the first in my series of Oops stories, or tales that tales of missteps in my life that always turned out okay in the end. But you can see this is a single sheet of paper, and when you fold it in a specific manner and make a cut through the center just right here, it will fold up and become a little book like this. And so those are pages from my book. People were so thrilled with the memoir-based zine project that I was asked to figure out how to continue it. Immediately after the memoir-based zine project completed, 20 members began meeting to plan this new project, the Zine Club. We settled on a plan of making one zine a month based on a different theme each month. And I'm going to mention that, in my opinion, I thought we were just going to continue doing memoir-based zines, and everything, the theme would just be memoir because that's all I want to do. Turned out other people had different ideas. And so we started creating a list of themes. And I'm going to say I've managed to insert myself into virtually every one of them because that's the way my books are. Anyway, so we settled on a plan of making one zine a month based on a different theme each month. And we mail our zines to each other. So there's always a gem in our mailbox. We agreed to start with a 6-month series, which launched in July of 2023. In true collaborative form, members suggest themes and we vote to determine which have the most interest. The first themes were banned books, poetry inspired, a seated zine, the alphabet, a 6-word zine, and no tech. Members are allowed to interpret the theme however they choose or to ignore it completely if they have something else they want to present. I've done that myself a few times. I have monthly Zoom meetings to discuss the upcoming theme and to add more detail to the zines we've sent out. As we were nearing the end of the first series, there was unanimous agreement to continue for another 6 months with new themes of amazing women, a day in the life. We chose February 29th as the day. Exploring things that are new, food for thought, recipes for life, song lyrics, and travel apocalypse. At the end of the first full year, a couple of members dropped out, but we also got a couple of new members so that our numbers have stayed at roughly 20. We agreed that we would accept new members at the beginning of a new series and that we did not want our group to be larger than 25 members to keep it personal and intimate. It was at this point that we opted to go to one zine every 2 months, so that's a total of 6 per year. We're currently in that series with the themes being Notes to My Younger Self, Fantastical Creatures, Asked to Quiet Down, Spoke Louder, Events That Move Us in Unexpected Ways, Quotable, and a 3-word prompt of blue, visible, and drawing. In yesterday's meeting with the group, we discussed our path forward, and it feels very likely that we will continue. Provided that happens, we will welcome new members beginning in July. If you're interested in joining this group, please email me using the link in the chat. And as you can see, I make a little box to house each of these zines. So they're all the same size, and I try to decorate them in some way that relates to the theme. The Moorhead National Zine Collective. Another change that happened at the end of the first year was that one member added the notation to her zine, created for the Moorhead National Zine Collective, which I thought was tongue-in-cheek, but soon others started using that name as well. And finally, in spite of my dislike of promoting myself, I've started using it myself, proudly. In fact, a couple of local members and myself have tabled at zine fairs under the name Moorhead National Zine Collective. And there you can see us. Okay, turning artist books into zines. Focusing on zines has given me the opportunity to create new forms of many of my unique artist books. Since I do not edition my books, and most of them are too personal to give up, it's wonderful to be able to get get them out in the world so easily. Like most artist books, I'm just thrilled anytime anyone wants to read my books. So zines definitely expand their audience. Not every book transitions easily to a zine format, but when I can figure it out, I'm so very happy. So this one is, here's the original book, The Doty Chronicles, which tells the story of my imaginary childhood friend who was always doing bad things and getting me in trouble. And then this one, Ground Transportation, is the story of various methods of ground transportation I've had over the years, including my walking shoes, my bicycles, Guatemalan buses, different cars, etc. This one, my transition to Zoom, came from the page that I submitted to Mabel Dean during the traveling book project for her book. And it talks about how, against my better judgment, I started leading Zoom meetings. My initial attitude was absolutely not, no way. And 2 weeks later, I was leading my first Zoom meeting. This is my zine version of the book Long Distance Love, which is that hand-cut poem. And it's quite large. I think it's 10 inches at the peak. So getting it small enough to be produced on this size of a zine is really gratifying. And I love getting that one out in the world because the poem is so lovely. My Powerline Trail adventure was probably one of my first in the series that I call my oops adventures, where something could have gone very badly, but in the end, it ended up okay. So those are some of the books that I have transformed into zines. Okay. This slide focuses on the current project of the Zine Club, but really I strive to follow these tenets anytime I'm leading a project. What has made us successful? Groups often disband, after a year or even less. We're nearing 2.5 years, including the memoir-based zine exchange. What has helped us stay together? This is what I think. Flexibility. Themes are meant to be an inspiration, not a limitation. Members are free to diverge wildly or to skip a month or two. No pressure. Due dates are suggested, but not bound to. 1, 2, 3, or 4 months late is just fine. We're always happy to get them. Monthly Zoom meetings with freedom to talk about whatever is important at the moment. Listening to the members about what works and what doesn't work. And in our meeting yesterday, we just had a very good conversation about possible ways to change the format that we're doing. Just things that will make it easier for people, more workable. Respecting input. All members are involved in selecting the themes and sharing suggestions about how to improve, etc. Thank you for watching. Here are the organizations that I'm currently a member of and some of the duties and projects I've done with them over the years. Occasionally, I also teach stamp carving, paper cutting, and other simple techniques. And in fact, I will be teaching stamp carving for Paperworks Tucson in August via Zoom.
Laurie, I knew your presentation was going to be fantastic, and I'm just sort of overwhelmed with the amount of collaboration, the number of artists' lives you've touched, the number of books and zines that you've helped foster. I started to take a number count and then I just gave up midway because it's really quite exceptional. So thank you. You really are an inspiration. And I'm sure that there are some questions, but I just might lead off with a very open-ended question. Have you ever thought of contacting the Moth with the Memoir Zine project? I think it would make a great show.
That's so wonderful. I know. Okay. I mean, maybe we'll see. What I have been doing is we have something similar to The Moth, but a much smaller version here in San Diego, and it's also in Albuquerque. It's called Dime Stories. And people are invited. It's open mic, so you just have to sign up. You get to read a 3-minute story that you have written, and you don't have to have it memorized, so that's good. And you get up and you read it. And I have now read 4 of my zines. I've had to greatly edit them usually to get it down to that 3 minutes, but it is so much fun to get up and hear the laughter at the appropriate points, and then I also take copies of my zines, and when I finish my reading, I say, here, I've got a more detailed version if you'd like a copy. And I often end up giving out 4 or 5 or 6 to people. So I'm always happy to have my zines out. Any of my stories in the world is just a delight for me. And
I love that approach. And I think as someone who's collected artist books and worked with artists, I know how important it is to have a unique single edition, but it's often prohibited to getting that word out. So your idea of transitioning your content to zine format is just so brilliant. I love it.
thank you. Yeah, I started doing it during the memoir-based zine exchange, because it suddenly hit me that, oh, maybe I can figure it out. It's like not every book immediately lends to that format, but the one, if you work them out, because there is a lot of flexibility with that single sheet of paper, folded exactly the same way, and then either cut or not cut in different ways. And you can end up with a total of 16 faces, or pages in the book. And including what become like hidden pages that you can have secrets in. There's all kinds of things to do with that single sheet of paper. And, when you're out and people, you say, do you want one? And people are like, really? I can have it? I'm like, it's a single sheet of paper. It's nothing, yes, please. So yeah, it's fun.
That's great. I love that both of your daughters are here today, and I love that you started your art career at art camp with your daughters.
I
So
really,
that's
yeah.
really terrific. I might ask you to go back in time a little bit. Lucia Harrison and I were just talking about artist books the other day and about maps and using maps. And I loved that first book that you showed, Mapping the Imagination. Can you talk a little bit about that project or?
Sure. I actually, let's see, where did I put it? It's here. There it is. Okay. So this is the book. That's the front cover. And then it opens up and it spreads out to have the narrative story. Okay. But then when this is fully opened, it opens to a map fold like that. And so I told the story starting in this corner and then coming around, and there's some maneuvering and stuff. But it's about a story I took when I was a trip I took when I was 12 years old. Here I am, and those are my go-go boots. And we started in Redding, California, and my aunt drove us up to Kootenay Lake in British Columbia. And so, this is some of the route. We were in this giant Cadillac. There were 6 of us, including my younger cousin. And anyways, it was my aunt and her sister, two of her sisters. Anyway, we did this fantastic trip. And at the end of nearing the end of the trip, the sisters were trying to divvy up the expenses. And they could not figure out how to do the math to figure out who owed who what. And 12-year-old me says, would you like me to do it? And they were like, yes. And so this is the thing showing me, with a calculator, but I didn't even have a calculator at that time. And I was, it was like a foreshadowing of my future because I've always done accounting. Anyway, so this was my very first artist book. And here is where I committed myself that this is the first in a series, even though, I mean, it is literally the first, but in spite of my grumbling when she told me to do a series, that'll never happen. I did commit myself with that. And there's now,
Amazing.
yeah, thank you.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
And we have time for one more question, and I think it was going back to that converting the art book to the zine from Candace, who wanted to know, do you essentially redo the book in a new format all
No,
over again, or?
no, I photograph it, scan it in, photograph it, however it reproduces well enough, and then I manipulate it on the computer, put it into a Word document and print, put the images in the proper way and then print it out. And so it's just using photos and a Word document.
Great.
Yeah.
One final thought, Puget Sound Book Artists will be celebrating 15 years as an organization in 2026. So I think for those of us in that organization, you've given us a lot of ideas about ways that we might create a special project for that anniversary. But I also want to take a moment and thank you for your outstanding Zoom facilitator skills as well. I'd like to see that zine about that. But
I'll
thank you
send it
so
to you.
much, Laurie. Yeah,
Yeah, I was like,
fantastic presentation. And
thank you.
everyone on the call, I just want to remind you that our next Zoom meeting is coming up fairly soon, April 10th. And we're going to feature Heidi Gustafson, who is known as the woman archiving the world's ochres. She works from her cabin in the woods of Washington. She's creating a multicolored library of mankind's first pigments. And I'm delighted to say that Suzanne Moore will be helping to facilitate that conversation. And it's the first of 2 sessions that we're going to focus on color. So it's a nice follow-up to Laurie's work. And again, thank you for inspiring all of us and really making this windy, blustery March day a good one for us all. So thank you.
Thank you
And
so much.
thanks everyone for coming.
Okay. Thank you.